Alright, this is Big Boss Foxhound Woodsball coming to you from Fort Lauderdale and from my blog page over at outerheavenpaintball.blogspot.com. I'm also repping the guys from Acid Tactical, so you can check them out at acidtactical.com. Anyway, for all you guys that know me or have been following my channel, yeah, I do tactical paintball. I teach players how to do certain things, but the other part of the coin is that I am a gun guy. I am a firearms enthusiast, historian, and I am a firm believer in the Second Amendment. But here's the thing. Our rights are under attack in these fronts. Let's ignore the fact that it's a fucking election year. Let's ignore the fact that one guy may not be the most likable guy, but he's a whole hell of a lot better than the current cackling hack that's right now a cut hair away from the Oval Office. Let's ignore that factor right now. But regardless, the threat of tyranny is no different than at the inception of our country up until the very present day. But we also have to look at how certain people are using countries as examples of what gun control is, but we also have to keep in mind where those countries currently are, and they've degenerated into what I would call soft tyrannies for one reason or another. But I'll try to tie all that in, but we are going to be discussing how to debunk some of these gun control bullshits. And before I get started on that, let's have a word from our friends and sponsors over at Acid Tactical. Check them out over at acidtactical.com. And remember, when the shit hits the fan and you've got to trust your gear with your life, ask yourself this one question. Can your gear survive the acid test? We'll be back right after this.
I'm serious. Think about it. How much have you heard this phrase? The blood of liberty. Wash it, though. Give me a break. No, I mean it, seriously. And by the way, if they want to think to take on government if we get out of line, which they're talking again about, well, guess what? They need F-15s. They don't need a rifle. Folks, look, this is crazy what we're talking.
Okay, for context sake, this video is a snippet from Mr. Colion Noir as part of a White House feed where the president's given a speech to members of Everytown for Gun Safety and Mamas Demand Action and Students Demand Action, which are some of the biggest anti-gun groups in the country. And Biden tripping up over the most iconic speech from one of our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, about the tree of liberty needs to be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. And that is a symbolic thing about keeping government in check by the will of the people. Now, saying that you need an F-15 to fight the government, not necessarily. If anybody understands their history, during the Vietnam War, America had air dominance, but we lost the ground war, we lost the political war because the communist adversaries utilized asymmetric warfare. Now, that's pretty much, at least from my understanding, how another American Civil War or any kind of civil strife or civil uprising would be. It would be an unconventional war. But then again, what president in their right mind would want to order the bombing of their own cities? What military commander would want to issue such orders? And what American soldier, sailor, airman, or marine would in good conscience want to carry out said orders to pretty much drop bombs on their own countrymen and perpetuate this conflict even further?
One more thing. So that's all I'm saying is that they're not these crazy people.
Okay. Here's the thing. Once black people get guns in this country, the gun laws will change. Trust me.
That's what happened.
Okay. This is one of those things that really pisses me off. Has anybody even noticed that the second race is thrown into the mix of gun control, the left and those that scream the loudest for gun control or gun safety, as they like to call it, they have no qualms about playing to the worst racial stereotypes imaginable. Then again, for all of us who are more historically inclined, it could be said that the 20th century was a pretty messed up century for a wide variety of reasons. But as far as American history goes, it was also pretty deeply racist, and I'm not going to make any bones about it, especially because we were a majority Protestant or Christian country, and yeah, early drug laws and early gun laws were designed to oppress African Americans, Hispanics, Orientals, as well as Native Americans. Hell, even Catholics were discriminated against, considering the massive amount of anti-Catholic sentiment. The prejudice against Italian and Irish Americans that were Catholic is pretty well known in this country. And that didn't change until JFK got elected. Fuck. But still, I digress. Long story short, the left and those that scream the loudest for gun control will play to racial stereotypes without wanting to do jack shit to help the inner city. So, let's say if you're an African American gun owner, then you are going to be stereotyped as something like this: an uneducated gangbanger who's slinging dope somewhere. And if you're a Hispanic firearm owner, then you're seen as a cholo, also an uneducated gangbanger with a lowrider. And if you're a Muslim or an Arab, then you're going to be seen as a terrorist or a religious zealot with an AK-47, just as a means of pushing the gun control narrative.
How do I defend myself and my children against two guys who have AR-15s? Tell me how. And you said yourself that the police may not make it there in time. Tell me how.
You know what? The best chance you got in a situation like that is to get out the house.
She just stated that
So
they
is that
reach
30
far.
rounds a piece? That's 90 rounds of bullets firing through the home.
You think I can outrun that?
You need to get out of the house.
This guy looks way too fucking smug for his own damn good. Then again, I can only hope to God this man does not have any children, because, God forbid, some nut job or two decide to break into his place. He's going to turn tail and run, and he's going to leave his family high and dry. So, shows the kind of man he is. Anyway, what this piece of shit was talking about is what's called a legal duty to retreat. And this is usually in very gun control heavy states like the People's Republic of California or the People's Democratic Republic of New York or maybe the Social Republic of Illinois. But long story short, when the legal duty to retreat laws were drafted up, this came at a time when there were those in power who thought very dimly about African Americans, Aboriginals, Hispanics, Orientals. Hell, these guys don't even like Catholics. Whether you're an Italian Catholic from Rome or you're an Irish Catholic from Dublin, the point of the matter was the legal duty to retreat law was designed to keep these particular minorities from being able to adequately defend themselves. And with that being said, we know that particular thing does not fucking fly in many states that don't have the most stringent gun control, because there's the common sense notion that when seconds matter, the police are minutes away. That means you've got to be your own first responder, and a lot of the facts back it up, which only feed into the understanding that our mainstream media is extremely biased toward one side of the political spectrum.
So Tim is a hunter and a gun owner who believes, as the majority of gun owners do, that we need reasonable gun safety laws in America. So as governor, he expanded background checks and increased penalties for illegal firearms sales. And together, when we win in November, we are finally going to pass universal background checks, red flag laws, and an assault weapons ban.
By the way, as you heard, I was one of the best shots in Congress, but in Minnesota, we believe in the Second Amendment, but we also believe in common sense gun violence laws.
Okay, there is a lot to fucking unpack in this one. First off, when they talk about common sense, quote-unquote, gun safety laws or sensible or reasonable gun restrictions like President Obama put it after Sandy Hook, question is, by whose definition are we going by when we talk about common sense or sensible, reasonable? Because what is sensible and reasonable to somebody may not be so sensible or reasonable to somebody else. These are these kind of vague tactics that they like to drop in to lull people into a false sense of security. Then again, when we talk about red flag laws, that's pretty much an ex parte communication with a judge to sign off on a warrant to confiscate legally owned firearms, and this sadly can be weaponized by ex-lovers, people that you work with that may not like you, any number of things like that, and it violates due process so egregiously that I'm surprised that the Supreme Court did not strike this shit down. And when we talk about an assault weapons ban, they tried that in 1994, and their military features, quote-unquote, were just purely aesthetic and cosmetic that did not have any bearing on the function of the weapon system, and it did not reduce crime. Hell, it didn't stop the 1997 North Hollywood shootout. It didn't stop the 1999 Columbine massacre, yet they want to still push it. And when you talk about a so-called universal background check, you can't do that without gun registration, and registration leads to confiscation and has been for decades the tool of despots to keep the people disarmed and subservient to the ruling party. We've seen it with Hitler, we've seen it with Stalin, Pol Pot, Mussolini, and now look at Australia, Canada, UK. It's like now, if you challenge government narrative, you can be arrested for quote-unquote incitement, showing what was once the proud British Empire has become soft tyrannies. And as far as Waltz goes, I hope to God he does not become our vice president, because having somebody who is a coward and a deserter is pretty much a slap in the face to any American who gave up their lives on a battlefield. If Waltz left the National Guard before a major combat deployment the way he did, if he did that back when my grandfathers wore that uniform, he would have been court-martialed for cowardice and desertion and been sent to meet the firing squad. But I digress on that one.
No one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
It was a human drama with emotions and tensions running high. Patty Connie is still trying to recover physically and emotionally.
They really did a number on me.
From the day police forced her from her home.
It was traumatic. All of a sudden, they were banging on the front door, the side door, and the back door. They said, "Let us in."
Patty tried to explain, She was on dry land, she had plenty of food and water, and didn't want to abandon her dogs. But it didn't matter.
If you see 6 or 8 police that look like linebackers pushing you in a corner, you're in shock. I'm saying, look at all my food. I got plenty of food. They kept pushing me back, and ended up like this.
Then, Patty showed them a small revolver she was carefully holding in the palm of her hand. A camera crew was there to capture what unfolded next.
I said, it's not even loaded. And I dropped it on the floor.
You got a gun?
Well, they punched me in the face. Look at my black and blue marks. Look at what they did to me. They dragged me out of here. I really thought they were going to kill me.
If you think gun confiscation hasn't happened in America, then you are sorely mistaken. As the video segment that you just saw showed, that's straight from Louisiana, right in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. You had New Orleans police, St. Tandy's Parish Police, you had National Guard going to people's homes and quote-unquote strongly persuading them to hand over their firearms that are legally owned while crime was running rampant. Last time I checked, something like a natural disaster was no excuse to suspend constitutional rights. Needless to say, the political backlash in the aftermath of all this was felt and it was apparent. And I can definitely imagine that a lot of people in power found themselves voted out of office as a result. However, this has also been a pattern among a lot of gun control advocates in positions of power, such as state governors and a few other people, such as what happened in New Mexico, where they used a public health emergency as a way to stop people from conceal and open carry. And last time I checked, natural disasters, viral infections, or anything like that is not an excuse to circumvent or freeze constitutionally protected rights.
That we're part of the national effort to get these weapons of war off the streets.
And we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
Okay, first off, Walls never went to war. He left the National Guard before his unit deployed to Iraq, so he's a fucking coward and a liar. Secondly, this whole weapons of war thing, this is such a loaded fucking term, it is unbelievable. Because when we really think about it, a weapon of war is a weapon that you use at any given moment when you fight for your life. That's why they're called weapons. There's not one real classification for their use in the military. So, let's test your knowledge. Would this be a weapon of war? Yes and no. The weapon here is the Enfield SMLE, Short Magazine Lee Enfield. This was the last rifle of Empire. It was standard issue for the Brits, the Canadians, the Australians, India. This was the last issued rifle of the British Empire. Or maybe this is a weapon of war. This is an M1 Garand. This is the first rifle to be issued nationwide as the standard issue rifle of the United States Armed Forces. Saw combat in World War II and Vietnam, and today is used by civilian shooters. That evolved into this little gem, the M14 rifle. Does this look like a weapon of war? Yeah, you've got interchangeable magazines. You can use this as a select fire as far as the military goes, but civilian legal, yes, and semi-auto only. Or maybe this version, of the M14 is a weapon of war. This is their enhanced battle kit, or enhanced battle rifle, enhanced marksman rifle. It was used by counter snipers as a designated marksman rifle. But how about something like this? Would this be a weapon of war? This is a Winchester Model 70, used by hunters for decades, but it also found use in Vietnam by the Marine Corps Scout snipers at the time. This is the rifle that Carlos Hathcock made his career on. Or maybe this is a weapon of war. This pictured here is a Knight's Armament M110 SAS, though it's also sold on the civilian market too, and is also a very good staple for a lot of hunters. New hunters like it because it's very forgiving as a semi-auto rifle. Older hunters would favor it because it's lightweight and easy to carry. Or maybe something like this can be considered a weapon of war. This weapon here is a Browning High Power, chambered in 9x19 Parabellum. This thing was standard issue to the Brits, the French, made by Belgian, by FN. This was developed by John Moses Browning, was the last pistol he ever made before his passing in Belgium. Or maybe something like this can be considered a weapon of war. This is an Italian-made Beretta M9. This thing has been a staple of police departments, militaries, and everyday civilian shooters for decades, so kind of got universal appeal. But let's get more primitive, shall we? Would this be a weapon of war? This is actually a Marine Corps K-bar fighting knife. It's an all-around general-purpose utility knife. It's been a favorite for many outdoorsmen, but was definitely used by Marines for close-in work during World War II. Or maybe the good old-fashioned baseball bat. You gotta bludgeon somebody to death. Yeah, it's there, it's brutal, primal, and it works. Now, the reason why I bring stuff like this up is because when you fight for your life, anything becomes a weapon. And when we want to get even more messed up, hell, the male genitalia can be considered a weapon of war, considering how rape and sexual violence has been used as a war tactic in places like Myanmar, Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East. Hell, talk to a girl who got rescued from a tunnel in Gaza after the whole October 7th attacks.
This is a ghost gun. This right here has ability with a 30 caliber clip to disperse with 30 bullets within half a second. 30 magazine clip in half a second.
Okay, for all you guys that don't really know, Kevin DeLeon is one of these dumb gun control guys who is a very example about why gun control does not work. You're letting stupid people dictate policy about items that they have little to no understanding about, and this is just the tip of the iceberg for a lot of these gun grabbers. People who have no comprehension about firearms, let alone the proper terminology, let alone how to properly handle them or anything like that. And it is quite scary that they have the levers of power.
In February, you introduced the Assault Weapons Ban and Law Enforcement Protection Act of 2007. It would regulate semi-automatic assault weapons, including weapons that have pistol grips, a forward grip, and something called a barrel shroud. Weapons with a barrel shroud would be regulated. What's a barrel shroud, and why should we regulate it?
I think the more important thing is that it also would have had banned the large capacity clips that Colin Ferguson had used, and also the killer.
Okay. But I read the legislation. I'm sorry, I read the legislation, and it said that it would regulate barrel shrouds. What's a barrel shroud, and why should we regulate that?
The guns that were chosen back in those days were basically the guns that most gangs and criminals were using to kill our police officers. I'm not saying it was the best bill, but that was the best bill they could get out at that particular time. I actually don't know what a barrel shroud is. I believe it's a shoulder thing that goes up.
No, it's not.
And here we are, round 2 of the ignorance bandwagon. Now, considering how these people are supposed to be in charge of the country, or they're supposed to be our elected leadership, why in the name of God do they not have actual experts talking about firearms to them or trying to explain it instead of political yes men who are only driven by an ideological agenda? This is the kind of idiocy that really gets under my skin, being that I understand this stuff a lot better than most of these people that are supposedly college educated, yet this is the kind of stuff that only further enforces my belief that ignorance is a societal cancer.
Okay, this video was a long time coming to finish, and I'm grateful that I've been able to finish it before Election Day, so there is that. But I'd like to propose a question. How do we have an honest discussion about firearms, gun control, and the Second Amendment when those that are screaming the loudest for gun control are demonizing us, otherizing us, trying to ostracize us from mainstream society? And these are the same people that are the most ignorant about firearms. They'd rather live in an ignorance-based, emotionally driven fear of them without trying to know them, and understand the very people that they are trying to forcibly disarm. With that being said, we can also look at our mainstream media and how they've only fanned the flames, either by serving said political agendas of those screaming for gun control and perpetuating this ignorance, and even going as far as to glorify the monsters that kick off these mass tragedies or other events. It's like, look at the monsters that did Columbine. We're still talking about them almost 35 years later. Rolling Stone magazine, they made the surviving Boston Marathon bomber look like a rock star. It's like we've glorified these madmen, yet we're stripping away the rights of people who did nothing wrong and using them as a scapegoat because of these madmen. Not to mention the political corruption and the opportunism of people who are screaming the loudest for gun control being the first ones to jump in front of a camera after a tragedy. It's disgusting. Now, I could go on for hours about arrogant, overprivileged political pundits like Michael Bloomberg and his super PACs or his gun control groups like Everytown, Moms Demand Action, Students Demand Action, and all that BS. I could go on about the Brady campaign, which are the first of the modern generation of opportunistic pieces of shit, or I could talk about grifters like David Hogg, who, in my opinion, are the abortions that never were, but I digress. Now, in the description to this video, I'm going to be putting links to other YouTube channels of gun tubers, as they're called, and this is going to be the channels that I like, the channels that I follow, that I would support, and these are the guys that are more versed in firearm culture, two-way politics, and many of them know their firearms inside and out a whole lot better than how I know them. So I'll leave links in the description to the video so that way you could find these guys, follow them, subscribe, and let's show the YouTube algorithm that we're not going to be bullied into silence. I'm even considering setting up a Rumble account, so if you think I should do that, by all means, drop a comment on that one. Anyway, if you guys like, you can catch a written version of this over at outerheavenpaintball.blogspot.com. I will post links in the description to this video, and I may post some links to friends of mine as well, but I'll have to talk with them on that one. But regardless, don't forget to check out the Outer Heaven Paintball Teespring shop if you're looking for some cool merch. Anyway, this is Big Boss, and I'm out of here.